Now.
Welcome to Burnt Out. The Burnt Out podcast shares the stories of firefighters, emergency personnel, and other first responders around the world to create a pathway to save lives. The stories you will hear are real and may be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. And now I'd like to introduce you to your host for Burnt Out, a 33-year retired veteran of the fire department, Skip O.
Thanks, Shawn, for that cool introduction. We also would like to thank our sponsors. We got Turning Point Madison County, we got Code Green, and we also have Bridges of Hope, the Warriors program. If you want to find out more about our sponsors, go on burntoutpodcast.org and see some details on them. Just click on their logo and you'll get more details on them. But we're here today with a Baltimore City Firefighter. That's a friend of mine for the last few years. And I just would like to welcome Shawn Keene to the show. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Hey, Skip, thank you. Glad to be here. Glad to share my story with everybody.
Well, I appreciate it. And when we tell all our guests, you know, I'm an amateur hour, a host, but I just shared my heart, my brokenness, and told Shawn, just be yourself. And just we're trying to, our job on here is to share a little bit of our brokenness, to reach out to a first responder that has a mental illness, whether it's addiction or PTSD. And Shawn, could you give us a little glimpse about your background, about who you're married to, what department, how many years, and what you do now on the department?
Sure. I am actually, I'm married for 24 years. We've been together 27 to an angel who I'm sure, she's my second marriage. I'm sure God sent to me to help me get through my struggle that came up in the last 2 years. Well, 2 years ago. I have 3 children, 4 grandchildren, 8, 3, 1, and a newborn. So I get to spoil them. I currently work for Baltimore City. I'm actually a EMS lieutenant now, is what I do. So I supervise what I have 4 medic ambo units. I think it's 3 ambos and 3 medics and 4 ambos. I'm sorry, that I supervise, and I've got 23 years with Baltimore City. I'm on my 23rd year, and 32 years total in the fire service with volunteer time.
Man, that's impressive. It seems like you put a lot of work and effort in that, a lot of time.
Yeah.
So you would be classified as an old timer, I think, after 20 years, you're an old timer, I think.
So we just hired, just graduated a young lady, paramedic, who I graduated with her mother. So yes, I would officially be an old timer.
I tell you, it's amazing the tradition, fire department, police department, Army, how, you know, our family members, or we know of people, somebody's father that we worked with. It's just it's a big family. Sometimes families do fight too.
Well, her dad was actually a police officer. I actually graduated high school. I guess I should clarify. I graduated high school with her mom. So that does officially old time me.
Well, that's good. Well, first of all, thank you for your service. And it sounds like today you're are you having a good day today?
I'm having a great day.
Well, I know from our conversation in the past, it hasn't always been that way. Could you give people to kind of tell your story, and then we'll ask some questions during your story. I might interrupt you a little bit and kind of reflect on some other things we might expand on that might reach out to somebody. So you want to tell your story about your dream of being a firefighter, and then the hype of getting on the job, and then the downward slide.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the emergency era. So I think anybody who was born in that early 70 range grew up in that era where we wanted to be in the fire department. And I was lucky enough to live that dream out. Not many people get to live their dream that they had as a child. So that was great. I grew up, and I'll add this in there in the beginning. I grew up with a very abusive and controlling mother, which at the time we kind of hid in the family, and that comes into play later on. But so I got into the fire department at 20 years old as a volunteer. My dad actually volunteered before he went to Vietnam, and then volunteered again after he came back from Vietnam. So I had the honor of actually riding with my father back in the volunteer days, which was pretty cool now that I can reflect on it. So I work in Baltimore, which is has a high rate of violence. Obviously, that's all over the news. And 2015, I ran a call that changed my world. I didn't realize how much I was compartmentalizing things prior, but in 2015, I ran a call with a gentleman who had been drinking and left his baby in the car for about 17 hours. And everything changed after that. I don't want to go into too far into details for that, just to respect the young lady, the little baby. But it was bad. It was very bad. And I then became the lieutenant with the crew. Instead of sitting down and being the CISM recipient, I felt that as the lieutenant, I had to take care of the crew. So I never took care of myself through that matter. And all the other kid calls I ever had started coming back. I started with nightmares, not sleeping. Nothing's wrong with me. This is normal. Fighting with my wife, arguing. And then the drinking started. And it started out slow. And it steadily increased over a 5-year span from 2015, late 2015, into 2020, to the point that on my days off, I was drinking about a 30-pack of beer a day to medicate myself, to help sleep, to help function, to help do anything, because it was kind of crippling.
Well, Shawn, did anybody at work, your family, start noticing and say anything about it? And how did it affect your work ethics? Slowing you down a little bit. Did any of that happen?
So my wife recognized the change, and of course I argued there was no change. There's nothing going on. I'm just having fun. Work, there was nothing noticed at work. Nobody picked anything up because I never went to work drinking. And I always said I was functional, and I realize now I was functional for work, and that's the only thing I functioned for, was the job. The job was the only thing that kept me from driving off a bridge, because I live near the Susquehanna River. Anybody knows the Susquehanna is from New York down to where I live. And I had a plan to drive off the bridge at one point. I don't talk about that too often, very seldom, because that's the rock bottom point of my life, was the decision that I was going to drive off a bridge one morning. I didn't have a specific date, but that was my thought process to end it all, because I couldn't escape the alcohol, the nightmares, the flashbacks, driving past the intersection where the call came out at. It just was constant. It was a constant battle.
Well, I know you the drinking stuff, and I understand that mindset. I can relate, along with a lot of other first responders out there too. You suffer in silence. Is there any other like character defects that came out, or other symptoms of what was going on with you? You had the nightmares, the drinking. Is there anything else that was glaring to you or to other people that was apparent?
Oh yeah, I became very miserable with my wife. The flashbacks to I would talk about calls when I was drinking that were years and years old, 10 or 15 years prior, that were involved kids. And they would all start coming out. And I didn't realize how bad I had compartmentalized those calls to hide them. Yeah, but they would come out when I was drinking, and I wouldn't remember it. My wife would tell me about it later. And I said, hey, I was just thinking about him. There's a million excuses you can make when you don't want to face that demon. And I had 1,000,001 of them, I think, at one point, to argue with my wife that nothing was going on. But nobody at work picked anything up. My work didn't suffer. I didn't get put on charges for bad conduct. As a matter of fact, I would work some overtime. I could go a couple days without drinking there, but then as soon as I get off work, it was right back to and unfortunately, I live in an area where I live within walking distance of 2 liquor stores, so it was very easy to get the alcohol as well. It was everything working against me at that point.
Did you try? I'd go to the fire station, stay there 72 hours, so I'd stay sober. Did you? Is that what some of the stuff was? You doing that?
Yeah, the longest shift we were allowed to work is 38, and I was doing 38-hour shifts at times just to stay away from the alcohol. And that seemed like the only time that I didn't have the nightmares and I didn't have the flashbacks as bad was when I was at work. It seemed like, that was a calming place for me, maybe, because I felt like I was doing something.
Well, leading up to the big change, say a few weeks beforehand, when you finally hit your emotional bottom or spiritual bottom or whatever you want to call it, could you describe a few weeks leading up until you got help?
So it was about a year of me looking at the International Association of Firefighters Center of Excellence website. I looked at that website 100 times. I printed out the main page with the phone number on it, and I several times had punched it into my phone and never hit send. And In that year leading up, I quit drinking in July of 2019. I then quit drinking again in July of 2020, which lasted a month, the dry July. And then I promised my wife I would quit. And August of 2020, I was trying to quit and I failed miserably within 15 days. And God sent me an angel in August of 2020. A random Facebook post that said, today is 6 months, tomorrow's just another day. And I thought he quit smoking. So I was like, you quit smoking? Congratulations. That became a Facebook Messenger message, which became text messages, which became me actually opening up for the first time to anybody outside my family, my wife, not even family, my sister didn't even know what was going on, that I had a problem. And so that became phone calls from the guy I work with, which then I opened up to another person who I knew had went to rehab. And I said, I know we haven't really discussed it, but here's what's going on. And his comment to me that day, and I'll never forget it, was, get on the phone now and make the phone call. And I did. With a beer in my hand and tears running down my face, I was on the telephone on September 17th of 2020. And I only remember that date because the next day was my anniversary. So my wife's anniversary present that year was me going away to get taken care of. So
Who'd you call?
I left on the 21st. I called the IFF Center of Excellence and spoke to them. They were very helpful, very calming. With us, I was at rock bottom. And I will tell everybody, and I'll leave to this too. Rock bottom has trap doors. So if you think you're all the way down, there's trap doors. And I found that out in the center when my wife told me she was ready. She had already looked at a house. She was ready to go because of what was going on. So that was my trap door. And I didn't realize at the time. I kept saying I was getting us fixed. I was going to get us fixed. And I didn't realize I had to fix me first before I could fix anything else in my life that I broke. So I went to the center on September 21st. 10 o'clock at night was my admission time, which you've been to the center. It's kind of freaky there in the dark. So I had no clue where I was, what was going on. Even though I live in Maryland, I live 2 hours away. I woke up the next morning and had two guys there with me. We were in quarantine for the 2 days for COVID. And I started from there. 38 days later, I walked out a new man.
I've been there before too. I remember scared, that fear, that, oh my God, why am I coming here? And when you went through there, what kind of things did you do? Was you in that trauma therapy, or what kind of, tell the people that aren't firefighters, that's never been there, that don't know about treatment, family members are listening. Can you go into depth about that?
Sure. So I went in just with alcohol as the substance abuse route. My first day out of quarantine, I had my first ever conscious panic attack. Never had, my wife told me I've had millions of them drinking, but I had my first conscious one. And a young fella was sitting outside when I had to get out of the station house during therapy. I walked outside. He was there. He walked me to the woods. There's a walking path at the center for you to walk to. We got up in the woods to the walking path, and he calmed me down. And at that point, I became a substance abuse major with a minor in mental health, where I was admitted to the trauma classes. So I did the regular substance abuse daily classes. And when I say daily, we ate breakfast at 7, and I think 8 we started class until like 4:30. We started classes. And 1 hour, 3 days a week, I would have trauma class. And I did the trauma classes. I did the trauma class with somebody I was in the same one with somebody who's done a podcast for you. So I have a classmate there who's talked, and it was beyond helpful. I did the trauma class, and I got not only the call out that Trip started everything. I talked about my mother. First time, and at that point I was 49 years old, just about to turn 49. It's the first time I had talked about that outside of my wife. Never talked to anybody about it. And it was very peaceful to get that off my chest, that this was something that I carried with me all those years, that, she would do physically, mentally abusive. She would, I remember being a kid, she would lay in her bed and pretend that she was dead. And you're 5 and 6 years old, that panics the hell out of you. So she, do things like that, or thought it was funny to hold a pillow on your head to carry on, or carrying on. I'm making air quotes so somebody will see that. But so it was that kind of mental abuse that she would do. So that kind of put me in that mode of having to protect children. And when I couldn't, we figured out with the trauma program, that's when everything fell apart between not taking care of myself and being a lieutenant and not being able to protect that child. Everything started falling apart. And it took 30 years basically for that to happen. And years don't matter. I found out it could be in a year. Somebody could be in the department for a year. But the trauma program, the inpatient program there of 38 days is stellar. They're second to none. I saw Audra. I did. She wasn't my actual therapist, but I did hypnosis before I left. And in her suggestion, she told me that I would be sick if I smelled alcohol or tasted it. So we'll fast forward to 2020. I found a bottle of whiskey left in the cabinet up underneath. I was dumping it out and I started gagging. It was that bad. It was that strong and that nasty. And to this day, I still can't stand the smell of alcohol, which is fine with me because I've now been sober 20, this month will be 27 months. So that's my last drink was September 20th. I went to the center and I blew a 000 because I was afraid of getting a DUI driving 2 hours. So I didn't drink my day of admission. And I haven't drank since the 20th of September 2020, and I'm quite happy with that.
That's awesome, man. I tell you, when I heard your story, a lot of us, me included, I thought, my problem started with those runs. It didn't. It started when I was young. Stuff that I didn't know about, like you'd explained about your relationship with your mom. It sounds like you worked through that, and man, I applaud you for finishing the 38 days and for you're sober today. But when you was in the center, I don't know if you ever did, what keeps you sober? What's some things aftercare stuff that you do that keeps you sober and happy?
So I know you asked this question at the end, but I have another answer for that end question of what keeps me going as a quote. What keeps me going now is I keep remembering that my addiction was giving up everything for that one thing, but my sobriety is giving up that one thing for everything, including my marriage, all of you guys in the worldwide peer support that I have. I know you would never turn your back on me, but I don't want to disappoint you. So that keeps me going as a sober person because I don't want to come on and say, hey, you know what? I messed up. That keeps me going. My family keeps me going. And just the fact that life is so much better sober. Plus, if you ever go out with people who are drinking, you can have a damn good time watching them while you're sober.
That's right.
That's
Well, you mentioned something about the worldwide peer support. A lot of this might be first time listeners and stuff. Could you explain what that is and how that helped you in your aftercare?
Sure. It's a 501c3 nonprofit. I actually serve on the board with them. Um, it's made up mostly of people who have been to some kind of treatment, firefighters, paramedics, who have been to treatment. And we actually have one police officer now who joins us. And we do rapid intervention, which in the fire department, rapid intervention is a team that goes in and gets the down firefighters. We do rapid intervention to get people in need to centers. They have a team for that. Um, there's been, what do you call it, scholarships where they've gotten treatment for firefighters who have lost their job over their substance abuse or their mental health for free into centers, into treatment, which is wonderful because treatment is very expensive. So Worldwide Peer Support does a great job with what they do. And I'm actually also a trained peer supporter now through the IFF. And I love helping people now. I get my main high comes from helping others that are where I was.
Absolutely. And I know also Worldwide Peer Support do support Zoom meetings on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern. You're on that quite a bit, and everybody likes hearing you share your story. And that's geared to first responders, whether it's military, anything. But Shawn, I tell you, I just applaud you for all the stuff that you do. And you do some TikToking too, don't you?
I do. I've been trying to work into talking about my mental health there because there are a lot of firefighter and EMS creators on TikTok. So I use my initials on there, SK, and that's ESKY if anybody wants to look me up. I think it's ESKY305 is the username I have. I want to start talking more about mental health on there because a lot of the creators talk about, excuse me, problems with the job, problems with EMS, patient care, things like that. But nobody's talking about mental health still because there's a taboo with that, and it shouldn't be. There's a huge red flag that comes up when you start talking about mental health within the fire service.
Sure. There's a lot of, I tell everybody I share raw things and try to make people uncomfortable. Well, if I'm going to do that, I need to tell people about me, but it's not about me. It's about helping other people. That keeps me sober and sane. When you sober up and you go back and you try to have an intimate relationship, sex and sobriety is a little different when you first starting out. I'm not, because I remember I was all lubed up on alcohol. I think I'm Casanova with my wife or whatever. And then when I sobered up, things didn't function real well. And things didn't function well. And I didn't feel it was hard for me to be intimate. Did you have any of those issues uh, coming back in sobriety?
No, I had more of an uncomfortableness at that point because of the damage that I had done. I know the damage that I'd done to my family from the drinking, and mine was more of a me being uncomfortable and putting my wife in a situation where she felt like she had to do something, because I wanted her to heal as well from what I had done. And we were real slow for a long time, and that was okay with me because my main goal was saving my marriage at that point. And thank goodness I can tell you that we passed our anniversary in September, and we're doing wonderful um, with everything. Everything's going great, and we laugh again. As a matter of fact, she had therapy yesterday, and I made a joke, and I had her. She has TMJ, the temporal mandible. So she had her jaw manipulated, and I made a joke, and she was laughing, trying to hold her jaw and not laugh at me. So we laugh again. We have a good time again, and it's um, as I said, sober life is the life. If anybody's struggling, I can tell you there is a glorious life on the outside of it.
Now, without telling her whole story, when was you in the center, did you guys do family counseling there and after the Center of Excellence?
We did. We did I think it was once a week. Once a week, I believe we had family counseling with Christy, who was my therapist, who was the meanie I needed to kick me in the butt. She's wonderful, but she kicked me in the butt and got me straight and made me a better person. She really did. She let me know. At one point, my wife was crying during one of the therapies, and I didn't say anything because I didn't know what to say. And she told me something is better than nothing, and you know, not to be quiet, basically. And I learned a lot from that. Just number one, to listen, but number one, to respond in the appropriate manner, not with anger or with screaming or denial, because you get very defensive when you're drinking and somebody confronts you. It's never a problem. And we did that a lot. So it took us a while to get back to being able to talk and a lot of help from outside, but we're I'm happy that I'm happy that I went the route that I went. I have no regrets of the center. I have regrets with the drinking, but from the center on, I have no regrets with that.
Well, did you have any like growing pains? Like a lot of people that get out, we got all these ideas, these goals. Okay, everything's going to be different. I quit drinking. But did you have any growing pains like life happened? You got out of there, you're sober, and then all of a sudden you have to fill this stuff sober. You can't run back to the bottle. You got to be honest, and you have to try not to step on other people. Have you had those growing pains in your sobriety?
Absolutely. My first one was all I wanted was a good cup of coffee when I left. So I drove to the center since I live 2 hours away, and I wanted a cup of coffee. And I'm very familiar with the area the center's in. My wife lived there when we met, so I would be down there frequently. I just wanted a cup of Dunkin' Donuts coffee. That's all I wanted. And I left and I panicked because life was out there. There was liquor stores and there were bars along the way. And I drove straight 2 hours home and never stopped for that cup of coffee. And I realized at that point was I went in and I took care of what I had to take care of, but the same shit that was out there was there. It didn't get taken care of. So work was still there. The kid calls were still there. Um, the other crap I dealt with at work was still there. And that was a shock that, hey, I have to use this toolbox that the center gave me, which just to my left is my binder still. And where's it at? Actually, right down low is my feelings wheel that we use. And I still use that stuff 2 years later, over 2 years later, um, to work through things because the growing pains, life doesn't stop. Life doesn't stop for anybody. That's a good Kevin Hart thing that I heard. And it's still there. The punches are still there, and you're still going to take the hits. You just now have a great toolbox, and you have to rely on that toolbox and count on it.
Absolutely. I tell you, I talked to a lot of different people, and they said and I felt the same way. If I quit drinking and drugging, everything will be okay. Well, not necessarily. It's a good step, but there's other behaviors in myself I had to change. And that's what I'm hearing from you. There's other behaviors yourself you had to change. Um, you know, so somebody's listening to this now. First responder, they're in the room, they're sitting by themselves, whether they're drinking or just sitting there lost. I don't know what to do. What are you going to tell them?
So I can have two answers for that. And I tell all the new people at work, find a therapist now. If you don't have a problem, if you don't have a mental health issue, you haven't had a bad call, you're not drinking, find a therapist now and build a relationship. Because when you're in crisis, it's not the time to try to find one because you're going to be in denial. If you're drinking now, if you're having a problem with any substance, any suicidal thoughts, there's a number to call. Is it, what's the new 3-digit, 988?
That's it.
988, call that number, talk to somebody. Worldwide peer support, my contact, I know my email's on the website for sure. I'm 100% because I looked to make sure what was there. That's there. You can find me on Facebook through my regular name. I'm there. I actually made a page a while back for people to be able to find me easier. So I'm there, but reach out to someone because there's life after that and you can heal and you can get a kick-ass toolbox, not only from the Center of Excellence, but there's several places that are first responder specific. That's a tongue twister. First responder specific that can get you taken care of. And it's okay to say you're not okay. There's no stigma with that. That stigma is the old guys, and you got my Gen X time frame where we were the old guys and we realized, oh shit, we got to take care of ourselves.
Sure. Well, I tell you, for one thing, Shawn, thanks again for sharing your story and stuff. And I know there's somebody out there, whether you're a first responder or not a first responder, whether you believe in a God or don't believe in a God, if you need help, reach out to somebody. As Shawn said, there's a 988 number you can do. You can go on the worldwidepeersupport.org. We have a phone number you can call, 24/7 service. We can help place you with different treatment facilities we have around the United States. We also got a good friend in England that helps us out with things too. So if you want to be a part of something, come and join us. And you don't have to be alone. Me and Shawn both has walked down that dark tunnel, but the good thing, we just kept walking and there is a light down at the end, but I needed a guide as Shawn needed a guide to a treatment facility and a therapist and a God of his understanding and his wife and his family and his workers. And I can relate with the same thing. Shawn, man, do you have any closing remarks? Yeah, could you repeat that quote again that you did earlier in the show?
So the one that the talking about addiction.
Yeah.
So the addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and the recovery is giving up one thing for everything.
I like that.
And if I had to give some advice, I would say that don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to ask for help. It's scary. It's the hardest thing I've done in my life was make the phone call. Everything after that was kind of cream cheese. It was I had the right therapist in the right place, and I got the right toolbox, and I can come out and I can take care of things. I surrounded myself with some of the greatest people in the world as peers to help me out. And I've had bad days, and it's okay. I was told this in the center my first week. It's okay to have a shit day. And with those shit days, I have a great set of peers that help me out. So
good.
Yeah. And I will tell you, and I don't talk about this much either, but my relationship with God has been steadily improving. It's something, I keep to myself. I've talked about this before. Sometimes you keep certain moves in private, but yeah, my relationship with God has been so much better. And that's just a true guiding light to help you also.
Well, that's
for
good.
me.
I always joke around, so I'm a recovering atheist. Thank God I lost that battle.
Yes.
But
my father-in-law has a great quote for that is, he said, if he's wrong, he only wasted a lifetime. If you're wrong, you wasted an eternity. That's what he talks about non-believers.
And we have no judgment one way or the other here on the podcast. We just,
No.
whatever we can help somebody, and we're going to do that. But Shawn, thanks again. And I'd like to also thank our sponsors again, Turning Point, Madison County, Code Green, Bridges of Hope, the Warriors Program. You can go to our link, burnoutpodcast.org, and you can see more information. Get a hold of them if you need help. If you need some other treatment facilities in your area or out of your area, let us know. Just messages on our website. And we also, if you want to get a hold of Shawn, message us. We can link you up to Shawn to talk to him if you need some help or want to go more in depth in his story. Worldwide Peer Support .org is that link. You can go 3 support Zoom meetings, Tuesdays, Thursdays, Sundays at 8 p.m. Eastern, and you can jump on there. You can meet Shawn that way too on one of those days when he's on there. But we'd like to thank everybody that's listened to us, and please share our podcast with your department, with your organization. And if you need any help or want more information from Worldwide Peer Support or Burnout podcast, just message us on one of our websites, and we'll get a hold of you. But for now, I'd like to ask everybody, man, when you go home tonight, shut your phone off, shut your radio off, and try to get some sleep. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Burnout. Burnout is brought to you by the Worldwide Peer Support. You can visit Burnout Podcast at burntoutpodcast.org or visit Worldwide Peer Support at worldwidepeersupport.org. Your host for Burnt Out is Skip O. Executive producer Shawn P. Neal. And produced by mypodcast.media.